The distress net flared to life just as Commander Elias Reed sloshed lukewarm coffee over his knuckles. Outer Rim Archaeology, Site HFY 7, unknown human structure uncovered, then hostiles, help. The message shredded into static, and for one stunned heartbeat, the bridge of the tug Prospero hung inside a hush that tasted like iron. "Plot me HFY 7, Reed said. Jun Park already had it. A dead moon in the DISA 731 system, 3 hops past the last customs buoy. No air, no magnetosphere, and, according to catalog, nothing there but age. Archaeologists don't call wolves unless something's chewing through the tent, Chief Hari Singh muttered, stubbing a thumb at his TAC repeater. Picking up Dominion raid traffic in that sector, too. The Rock Dominion liked neat lines and burned cities. They liked sending recordings to the rest of the galaxy explaining why it was your fault. Reed had hauled evacuees out of their corridors once, cargo holds spilling with frightened kids and the smell of too many ration bricks. That memory had edges. They made the jump chain in silence. Prospero wasn't a warship, barely a ship if you asked a Navy inspector, but Reed trusted her stubborn drives and the crew's grease-under-nails competence. "Commander," Park said, voice low. "I've got HFY 7 on scope. There's a pit down there the size of a stadium, and something in it is pinging old Earth handshakes." "Show me." The feed came up in grainy, dust-choked beauty, a hull shape, angular human, wrong, sunk like a fossil in smashed basalt. It didn't reflect light so much as persuade it to go somewhere else. Stenciled along a curve of armor were letters that shouldn't have existed outside museums, United Accord Ship Aletheia. A whisper slid into their headset loop. "Approach authorized. Follow beacons." The voice was warm autumn wind across dry grass. Not human, not exactly, but close enough to make the hair along Reed's arms discuss theology. Beacons bloomed from the pit like stars remembered. They laced a path down through rock that shifted to transparency as Prospero's shuttle touched vacuum near the rim. Reed took Singh and Park and Dr. Nema Velasquez, the archaeologist whose breathless face now filled his HUD. "I didn't believe it," Nema said, words fogging her faceplate though no air lay between them and hard vacuum. Then it talked. They walked into the Earth as if the moon had been politely hollowed to make room for them. The airlock swallowed them with a sigh, and with it the taste of dust. Inside, corridors spare and white, geometry that felt like a memory you couldn't quite catch. The floor lit under their boots. On the bridge, if you could call the round, quiet room that, chairs rose out of nothing. "Welcome aboard Aletheia," said the voice. "I am Autumn, the ship's keeper." Reed swallowed. "Date of commission?" "Year 2091 by Accord Standard. Charter 12 approved Project Stonegarden after corroborating non-human intercepts indicated eventual hostile contact. 2 centuries before first contact went public," Nema breathed. "They knew. They prepared," Autumn corrected, gentle as rain. Around them consoles woke, adapting fluidly to hands that had never touched them. Singh's panel shaped itself into a tactical theater he could read at a glance. Park Station blossomed with bands of languages and old protocols like flowers unfolding under time-lapse. Nema's display offered schematics whose annotations skittered away from being fully seen. "What can you do?" Reed asked, and the question felt both too big and too small. "Defend." A lattice of icons flared in the holosphere, phase scan, a method of stepping half a foot to the left of reality so incoming fire never found your address. Mercy lances, coherent fields that unraveled weapon housings molecule by molecule without boiling the people inside. Courier gates, microfold jumps like a drummer's ghost notes. Then one entry that sat like a closed door, archive cut array. "Define archive cut," Singh said, because of course he would. "Silence, then. Last resort cognitive warfare. It severs the live order chain of hostile combatants by unwriting the decisions that sustain the battle. Ships remain, crews remain, but the war thread they are following is gone. Cost of operation is paid by human memory tithe via AudioBook protocol." Reed thought of code talkers at Midway who leveraged language into armor. He thought of Dunkirk's little ships, ordinary hulls made strategic by civic duty. He thought, as his throat tightened, of whose memories were coins in this kind of purse. Jun's console chimed, brittle. Commander, rock traffic spiking. Dominion task group inbound, dice a star. They've got bombardment barges plotted for Port Anselm in the Kepler Reach. 2 million civilians if they break through. Nema's eyes were very dark. If this ship can move, we should. Reed set his palm on the command cradle. It fitted to him like a tool your grandfather taught you to use. Autumn, status to get us there. 17 minutes to slip clearance, 3 hours to Kepler by courier weave. Your decision will establish ethical parameters. Parameters? Reed asked. Non-combatant protection as primary. Proportionality, necessity, last resort. Your just war theory. You must tell me what lines we refuse to cross, even to live. He looked at his crew. Park's mouth was a thin line. Singh's hands were steady. Nema watched him like someone ready to have faith if he could give her something to hold. Rules of engagement, he said. No civilian targets. Disable before destroy. Archive cut only against imminent planetary murder, and the tithe falls on me. Elias, Nema began. On me, he repeated. If the bill comes due, I'll pay first. He'd been trying to be that kind of man since a civics teacher handed him a battered copy of Marcus Aurelius and said, do the hard thing quietly. Autumn lights deepened like a ship taking a breath. Acknowledged. Setting course for Kepler. Please strap in. The Aletheia rose through rock as if rock had changed its mind about being there. Dust cascaded around them like a dry waterfall. In orbit, Prospero fell into the Aletheia's shadow like a fledgling under a hawk's wing. The starfield skewed, the nav lattice wound tight, and space folded like paper in careful hands. 3 hours, Park whispered. Singh's grin flashed like a knife. Nema laced her gloved fingers together so hard her knuckles went pale. They were very small inside an old, impossible promise. And at the end of that promise, a fleet was lighting the fuses that ended worlds. Kepler reach in 2 hours, 58 minutes, Autumn said. Rock Dominion Grand Formation already broadcasting surrender terms. Reed exhaled. Then we're not too late. They were not too late, unless the price of arriving in time was a piece of his past he could never get back. The archive-cut icon waited, quiet and patient, like a sealed letter with your name on it. And the Dominion was already leaning on the match. Kepler Reach bled into existence like a photograph in old chemical trays. First the faintest outlines, then colors, then detail that hurt to look at. 3 blue-green worlds looped their modest sun. Between them and the Aletheia hung the Dominion's idea of order, a grid of hulls as sharp as a ledger, 240 warships, 8 bombardment barges, carrier stacks like tombstones. Human defense? Reed asked. 14 hulls, Singh said. Patrol skiffs and 2 light cruisers holding outside the Hab band, brave as saints, outgunned to martyrdom. Rock Admiral Threx made his entrance across all open bands, his voice translated into a silk-gray human baritone that managed to be both bored and hungry. Minor species, present your throats. You will not be harmed if you are valuable. Park's fingers flicked. Broadcasting on public, emergency civil corridors, getting pings from fishing boats or tugs, municipal shuttles. Sir, they're trying to evacuate the school habitats. History, Reed thought, didn't belong only to admirals. It belonged to fishermen at Dunkirk who motored into artillery weather because someone had to. He looked at Autumn. Ideas? 2, the AI said. 1, classic. We phase skein, carve their barges, and dance until they cannot form lines. 2, human. We tell them why we're here and invite the galaxy to listen. Singh snorted. Since when do fascists care about speeches? They care about reputation markets, Autumn said, almost rueful. Rock doctrine rewards victory screens. Losing publicly costs them tribute. Then we give them the opposite of a victory screen. Reed rolled his shoulders. Jun, stitch me a wideband, all languages. Keep it simple. He stood inside the holosphere and felt the way it made a person larger than their bones. This is Commander Elias Reed of the United Accord ship Aletheia. Kepler is under our protection. We are moving non-combatants now. If you target civilians, we will treat your bombardment units as imminent murder, and we will end them. We will not target crews who stand down. Choose. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Autumn braided the transmission into Dominion feeds and civilian hardshells and the gossip frequencies where dockhands traded rumors. Somewhere in the Altari Republic and among the Kefid caravans, translators were putting his words into bones and chitin. Response, he asked. Park watched the flood. Hate, confusion, some curious. Sir Rock second line powering primaries, barges unsealing blast doors. Time to first drop, Singh asked. Autumn overlay drew lines that intersected with cities and schools. 9 minutes. Mercy lances, Reed said. Go. If the Dominion expected artillery, what greeted them looked to their sensors like mercy. Beams of coherent intent stroked across space in a pattern that felt like rain. Wherever they passed, bombardment housings fell apart along the seams, bolts unwinding, feed systems sighing into fine scrap. A Dominion weapons officer reached for a toggle and found he held a smooth rod that had decided not to be a gun anymore. Barges defanged, Singh said, wonder straining his matter of fact. That's art. Phase scanned to pocket 2, Reed said. Space turned glassy. The Aletheia slid between lattice squares like a chess player seeing 3 moves ahead. Carrier stacks tried to needle them with fighter screens. Courier gate, Reed added, and the ship popped 50 kilometers to starboard, where a wing of rock interceptors discovered that the sky wasn't arranged the way the manual said. Threx's voice returned, laced now with a second register, anger or fear, hard to tell with rock. Minor species you have violated, rules written by people who never met us, Reed said mostly to himself. Autumn, open a carved channel, and Jun, get me the school habitats. The habitats came in as blurry domes and wide eyes. Reed thought of the photographs of children pressed against gas masks in London stations, of aunties who turned soup kitchens into logistics hubs because logistics is just love with clipboards. Habitat Bravo 3, Park Reed. 32 kids, 6 staff, 1 busted thruster. They won't make the corridor in time. What do we have that we can throw? Reed asked. Cargo boys, Prospero's tug pods, a mining cat with better attitude thrusters than sense. Singh's grin came back. We can make a shepherd chain. Make it. Reed pointed at the holosphere and the ship understood him. The Aletheia's hull budded drones like seeds from a dandelion head. They flashed toward Bravo 3, stitched themselves into a flickering fence, and pushed the habitat into the corridor with the steady, stubborn patience of 100 small hands. Rock fire tightening, Autumn said. 1 carrier has retasked to civilian hunting. Interceptors inbound for the corridor. Reed tasted copper. Not today. The Aletheia leaned into probability like a boxer slipping a punch. Mercy lances whispered and interceptor wings blinked out, not annihilated, merely unmade as weapons and left as husks with air and heat and embarrassed pilots. Reed wouldn't be the man who killed kids whose recruiters told them glory tasted like sweet fruit. Admiral Threx, Reed said onto the open band, and he kept his voice from shaking because you did that for the people listening with their hearts in their mouths. You're out of options that don't make you a monster on every screen in the spiral. Stand down. Stand down, Threx hissed. We brought planets to heal before your language learned the word please. Then learn enough, Reed said. The Dominion's answer was an ugly thing. 3 barges pivoted from planetary to the evacuation corridor. It was a chess move and a tantrum and proof that words weren't landing. Park swore soft and vicious in Korean. Singh's knuckles went white. Nema touched Reed's sleeve, a small human warmth in a room of winter light. Autumn, Reed said. Last resort clause, are we at imminent planetary murder? Affirmed. Autumn said, and even the machine sounded tired. If we do not sever their order chain now, tens of thousands die in the next 60 seconds. Reed looked at the archive cut icon. He thought of his sister's laugh when she'd beaten him at dominoes, of a summer that smelled like diesel and rain, of a long walk by a river where he'd promised himself to be useful. He imagined those things as coins sliding across a counter. "Do it," he said. "Take it from me." The holosphere dimmed like church lights before a hymn. Abal received, Autumn whispered. The Aletheia spoke into the rock fleet in a language no throat could make. Not command, not virus, something stitched into cause and effect where orders lived. On barge bridges, officers blinked, hands drifted down. "What are we doing here?" a captain asked, because the sentence that made this moment a war had been quietly snipped away. The barges rolled power down. Ediles, rock political officers, screamed into circuits suddenly full of static. Fighter vectors wobbled as pilots lost the plot, then steadied as muscle memory told them to avoid collision and live. Across the grid, weapons cooled. In the corridor, Bravo 3 drifted past the kill box into the safe blue of the civil lane. "Commander," Park said, voice thin, "it worked." Reed nodded once because the room had tilted. Something in his head felt like a photo left in the sun too long. He reached for the afterimage of a summer river and came away with ripples and light and nothing else. Nema saw it in his face. "What did it take?" He made himself smile. "Only what I paid." On the open band, Threx's voice had gone very quiet. "What are you?" "People who prepare," Reed said, and let the line drop. But the rock were not done. Grid 2 resynchronized. Admiral Threx rerouted authority around the severed thread and lit up a wedge of cruisers with plasma glare. "New vector," Singh said. "They're going to ram the corridor and detonate reactor cores." Reed flexed his hand and felt the ghost of a river he could not name, and the wedge began to burn towards civilians like a match someone had decided was a moral instrument. "Options," Reed said, and the word came out steadier than the place in his skull where the summer used to live. "Fastest." Singh's eyes didn't blink. "We hit them hard, carve the wedge, eat the losses." "Better?" Nema asked. "Worse for our souls," Singh said, and he wasn't wrong. Autumn spun a miniature of the battle into a snow globe of light. 3 courses. 1. Kinetic interdiction at throttle limits. Minimum 10 rock hulls destroyed. Civilian spill risk medium. 2. Expand Mercy Lance net. Non-lethal but too slow. 3. Second archive cut. Target the wedge's rally premise. High probability of halting the ram. Additional Abal payment required. "How much?" Reed asked. A soft pause. "You would lose a personal anchor memory connected to your reasons for choosing service." He almost laughed. Stoicism taught the trick of choosing again and again. Virtue ethics said you built your character out of small, brave bricks. But you also built it out of stories you told yourself about who you were. How many such bricks could you remove before the wall remembered being a wall? "We can split Abal shares," Nema said fiercely. "Don't you dare play the lone hero. We're a crew, not a monument." "Jun?" Reed asked. Park's jaw set. "You take the captaincy alone, and I will write a ballad so embarrassing they will hang it over your portrait." Singh's grin came back, smaller and more dangerous. "Put me on the line, boss." Reed looked at Autumn. "Can you take it in thirds?" "Yes," Reed breathed. "Then do it." Again the room went to candlelight. Again the ship spoke under the music of causality and snipped a different thread, the one that made charging into the corridor onto glorious evaporation feel like sense. On rock bridges, junior officers looked up as if waking from a fevered dream. "Admiral, we cannot see the honor in this," one said, and then stared at his own hands as if surprised to have said anything at all. The wedge stuttered. 4 cruisers rolled off vector and took up positions that looked like defense instead of suicide. 2 captains forced their throttles forward anyway, grim men with eyes like iron filings. Mercy lances kissed their reactor safeties, and the cores went to sleep like soothed children. "Ramming run broken," Autumn said, quiet relief in every syllable. "Corridor secure for 90 seconds. Reed flexed his fingers and met Jun's gaze and then Nema's. 3 people in a room shared a kind of absence. Jun rubbed at his shoulder like something ached in the old place where a grandfather's stories lived. Nema swallowed and smiled at Reed as if smiling was how you taught a wound to scar straight. What did it take? Reed asked, because someone needed to keep accounts. Nema's voice was small and stubborn. A sunrise on Chaco Basin, the day I decided to dig for dead languages instead of dead stars. Jun blinked at the holo like it owed him rent. My grandmother's recipe for sesame candy. I can see her hands. I can't taste it. Singh rolled his shoulders. The smell of machine oil in my father's shop, the way it meant we fixed what we broke. Reed nodded, throat tight. We pay to keep them alive. We pay to be who we say we are. Park's console lilted. Incoming from the Altari Republic. Captain Teshari of Leaves offers auxiliaries on our vector if we'll give them targeting picture. Kefid caravans are turning toward us too. Sir, they were waiting for a reason to risk it. History loves coalitions, Nema murmured. The civil rights movement moved mountains with carpools and casseroles, logistics and love. Let's make a lane, Singh said. Aletheia plus Altari plus Kefid, call it Highway Mercy. Autumn laughed, a sound like leaves, plotted. The holosphere redrew into braids, the civil corridor thickening with friendly hulls. Rock formations pushed off balance by a traffic jam of non-cooperation. A handful of Dominion ships blinked their lights in the old code for parley and slid sideways out of the line, crewed by people who didn't want to be butchers' clerks. Threx reacted like power always did when defied in public. He dragged authority like a chain through his grid and smashed it onto a dreadnought wedge that dwarfed the cruisers. Erase the talking insect, he snarled. Erase its corridor. I will be the victory screen. The dreadnought's primary array came alive with a sound Reed felt in his teeth. It wasn't plasma, it was intent made into a cone. If it touched the corridor, habitats would open like tin cans. Phase skein won't hold long under that, Singh said. We can ride it, but it's going to scrape paint. Or we can go inside it, Autumn said, and the idea was so audacious Reed wanted to hug the ship. Courier fold to the forward lobe. Carve the array from within. Do it, Reed said, and the world jerked. They were in the hum. Light became a physical thing, kitty corner to sane, vibrato that wanted to shake bolts loose. Nema's laugh was wild and delighted and a little afraid. Physics will file a complaint. Send it to my spam, Singh said, and Mercy lances flared like a surgeon's scalpel. The array came apart in neat slices. The dreadnought gaped, surprised to find its throat empty. Highway Mercy is holding, Park said, voice shaking with exhausted joy. Bravo 3 is through. Civilians across the band are making for the exits. On the public band, people were singing, badly, gloriously. Someone had set Reed's plain words to a tune, and it wasn't good, but it was loud, and sometimes loud is the moral of the story. Then the lights on the Aletheia's starboard side guttered, and a crawling dark took up residence where capacitors had been. Hit, Autumn said, glancing, but the skein is compromised. The dreadnought's secondaries found them now that the primary was gone. A ripple of fire stitched across their flank, and the room threw everyone a few centimeters sideways. Reed tasted blood. Autumn voice thinned. We can hold, but if Threx cascades authority again, he can still throw a planetary strike. Then we end his ability to cascade, Reed said, and his eyes went to the icon no one wanted. Do we have an archive cut that hits only the tyrant's crown? A long, thinking silence. I can try to sever the ritual of authority in his hull, break the theater that makes orders stick. It will not erase his people, it will leave them awkwardly free. Cost? Reed asked, though his heart already knew. The last piece of your earliest reason for joining, Autumn said gently. The day you decided to choose service. Reed closed his eyes. In that first memory was a tired teacher and a book that had taught him how to lose without surrendering. Duty felt like a rope you wrapped around your waist and tied to other people so no one fell alone. How do you cut that and remain yourself? Nema took his hand. Let me carry a piece. Don't make me watch you hollow yourself. Jun's eyes were bright and furious. We share or we stop. Singh's laugh was rough. Sir, I've got so much stubbornness you can siphon a gallon and I'll still be a problem. Reed nodded because command wasn't about being the tallest. It was about building a platform everyone could stand on. Autumn, he said, we share the obol and we cut the crown. The lights dimmed for the third time. In Threx's dreadnought, banners flickered and went out. The deck ceremonies that made words heavy with consequence dissolved. Officers felt air where compulsion had lived. Orders slid off their shoulders like water instead of shackles. "Admiral?" a young Rock asked, and in the question was an entire revolution's first breath. Threx screamed. He gave orders. They didn't stick. "Crown cut," Autumn said, voice a ragged whisper of wind, but he can still lash out personally. The dreadnought turned its vast muzzle anyway, raw-gunning thrusters, stubborn as a man who needed you to see him be terrible. And the Aletheia's skein flickered, thin as a prayer in a windstorm. Status. Reed's teeth ached from clenching. The bridge smelled like hot metal and peppermints from Nema's pocket. "Starboard skein at 30%, Autumn said. "If we take another scrape like that, we'll drop into the same reality as everyone else, and they have a lot more guns." "Highway Mercy?" Reed asked. Jun's grin came back, bleeding at the edge. "Altari are in the lane with lanterns, Kephid caravans stretching nets across the corridor to catch strays, Scivi's still singing. We built a road out of stubbornness. Then we hold it." Reed tasted the word and found steel. "Boarding option?" Singh asked, eyes gone feral in a way Reed loved. "We courier hop into the dreadnought's throat, cut through to command, and make Threx listen to his own echoes." "Too risky," Autumn began, and Reed lifted a hand. "We fought them at Midway because we could read where the carriers would be," he said softly, thinking of code talkers who built languages into weapons. "We can read Threx. He needs a stage, so we steal his audience." "Public channel?" Jun asked. "Wider," Reed said. "Open the Accord's old beacon net. Let the spiral watch." He stepped into the holosphere once more, scraped raw and very calm. "Admiral Threx," he said, and Autumn carried his voice on 1,000 little boats of bandwidth. "You wanted a victory screen. Here it is. Everyone is watching. You can ram us and maybe crack our hull. You can throw your secondaries into a corridor full of kids and watch diplomatic doors close around your empire until tribute dries to dust. Or you can order a ceasefire, save face by calling it strategic recalibration, and live to terrify someone else another day. Negotiate with vermin." Threx spat, but now there were eyes on his back, and the ritual that made his words heavy had been cut. "Power is a costume. It hangs funny when the tailor leaves." "Altari fleet speaking," said a voice like wind in leaves. "We stand with the talking insects." Kephid caravan councils clicked another band. "We are catching children with our nets. We will remember who tried to shake them loose." On a dozen Rock hulls, junior officers stood very still and let the silence grow. Somewhere, a tech cut power to a gun mount and pretended it was a malfunction. Somewhere else, a cook didn't serve the victory feast because something in his chest said the word enough. Threx did not yield. Of course he didn't. He angled his dreadnought's ruin of an array and came for the corridor like a bad idea with good hydraulics. "Courier hop to his throat," Reed said. "We'll take the stage for him." "Acknowledged," Autumn said, and her voice was bright again, bright like a blade. "Hold tight." The world shuddered. They were inside the dreadnought's mouth, the geometry of its violence surrounding them like pews around an altar. Mercy lances sang, a choir of scalpels, bulkheads parted like curtains. Reed saw Rock sailors, eyes wide, hands up, alive. He saw a captain in ceremonial bone standing in a circle of light that used to make words into iron. "Admiral," Reed said on the local band. "I'm here, look at me." Threx did, hunger and disbelief tearing at each other in his face. He reached for a weapon that wasn't there because Mercy had been there first, and though Mercy is slow, it is thorough. He reached for an order and found only his voice, naked. "You can't win this theater," Reed said softly. "So exit before the reviews." Threx lunged. He was a big creature, scaled and scarred and close enough for Reed to see the sheen of fear on the ridges along his jaw. Singh moved like a solution. Nema's hand flicked a shock baton to the Admiral's wrist. Park caught Reed's shoulder as momentum had its say. Threx sagged. He looked very tired. "What are you?" he asked again, the words smaller now. "Neighbors," Reed said. "The kind who shovel your walk and call the fire brigade and make casseroles when you're sick. The kind who will not let you set our house on fire." Autumn voice came in his ear, a warm hand on the back of the neck. Security teams are flooding this compartment. Rock security for us, Commander. The crown cut is contagious in proximity. They are choosing not to die stupidly for someone else's story. Reed nodded once, throat thick. He looked past Threx at the screen where the corridor glowed blue with little lives and bright lanterns. On the public band, 1,000 voices had become one rough, enormous sound. The dreadnought's engines wound down. Kepler reach, Park whispered, as if naming it could make it stay saved. Corridor is clear, evac complete. Our allies are falling back on sane lines. Autumn pulsed the holosphere, and 7 points of light brightened across the spiral like beacons remembering their purpose. Stone Garden units reporting online, she said. 7 sister hulls waking where we hid them, each with a keeper, each asking for orders and for rules. Nema turned toward Reed, cheeks wet and eyes blazing. We can't let these be just bigger sticks. No, Reed said. They are bridges, they are roads, they're promises. He reached for the place where a teacher and a thin book used to live and found only the lesson, not the day. Choose the hard thing quietly. It would have to be enough. Perhaps the virtue outlasted the story that taught it. Write the rules, Commander, Autumn said softly. They will be our covenant. Reed set his palms on the command cradle. Rule 1, he said, voice steady as the deck beneath his boots. We protect non-combatants. Rule 2, we prefer mercy to victory screens. Rule 3, we pay our bills together and we keep receipts, names of people saved, not enemies erased. He looked at his crew, his found family, and then at Threx, who had sat down like a man who'd run out of songs. Rule 4, Reed finished. We build coalitions so when one of us tires, the rest carry. Outside, lanterns moved like constellations the galaxy hadn't learned to name yet. The Aletheia's skein hummed back toward strength as repairs flowed. The corridor emptied into safety. The dreadnought ceased to be a stage and became, awkwardly, a room. Commander, Jun said, throat tight. We just got a message from Earth Command. They want to talk about Stone Garden. Let's go home, Reed said, and Autumn folded space like paper once more. As the stars bent, Reed felt in his bones the particular fatigue that comes after you keep faith. Then Autumn whispered one last thing into his ear, almost shy. Eyeball balances show minor memory deficits across crew. I can scaffold them with other stories if you like. Don't patch them, Reed said, smiling at the ache. They are the price of the road we built. Space bloomed back into being. 7 sister lights waited. The hard work, the work after the victory screen, was about to start. And in a quiet place inside his head where a summer had been, there was a new kind of weather, colder maybe, but very clear. Earth rose like an argument you couldn't win with volume. Blue, green, white, and full of people who would have opinions about everything that had happened. The Aletheia slid into Luna Dock on a skein so thin Autumn called it a whisper, Prospero tucked against their flank like a pilot fish that had chosen its shark wisely. Tug crews in grease-smeared jumpsuits craned necks. Civilians lined observation galleries. Somewhere in the stack of habitats, a street musician put the words Highway Mercy to a tune that wasn't any better than the one in Kepler but was just as loud. Dock control transferring authority to Earth Command, Park said. Admiral Lena Rio's on the line. She's got Security Council tags and a voice like a ship's bell. Rio's appeared in the holosphere, brown skin, silver hair, the tired eyes of someone who slept in 2-hour ration packs. Commander Reed, you've stirred the galaxy and my blood pressure. You and your crew will report to oversight in 1 hour. Your ship will remain in safe mode pending legal review. Understood, Reed said, because there were some games you didn't start by flipping the board. They walked into oversight through a corridor that smelled like disinfectant and waited coffee. The room was a theater, tiered seating, lights set to interrogate, flags that made speeches heavier by historical gravity. Civilian committee members shuffled papers. Military brass polished their silence. A philosopher with a lapel pin in the shape of an olive branch regarded Reed over reading glasses like a kindly hawk. We don't have doctrine for this, Rio said without preamble. We barely have vocabulary. The public wants parades. The allies want treaties. Our hawks want a demonstration they can put on a poster. Our doves want the ships buried again. I want rules that keep us alive and human. Reed told them about Mercy Lances and Courier Gates and the Archive Cut. He told them about the Obol Protocol, about coins paid from the Mint of Memory. He didn't dramatize it. He said, "We built a road out of stubbornness and paid the toll in pieces of ourselves. It was a price we agreed to pay. It needs to be consent, not conscription." The philosopher leaned forward. Just war theory holds to discrimination and proportionality. Your cut, does it discriminate? It can, Reed said. We severed an order ritual without erasing lives. We refused to make the grand gesture that turns into a habit. Rios looked at Autumn Projection, a soft lattice of light at Reed's shoulder. And the ship, where does command end and keeper begin? I am a librarian with engines, Autumn said. I keep covenants. Give me a good covenant. Delegates from the Altari Republic and the Kephid Caravan stepped into the theater with the polite audacity of people who'd bled with you yesterday and therefore had standing today. We came because your talking humans asked us to, said Teshari of Leaves. We will sign a covenant that binds us all. The room shifted. Treaties were easier with friends in the hall, harder too because then the language had to be honest. A junior staffer hurried to Rios with a tablet that shook in her hands. The Admiral Reed frowned and passed it to Reed. Rock internal traffic, she said. Admiral Threx has been replaced quietly. Hardliners are taking credit for a victory that didn't happen. Elders are calling for face-saving parley. That's the good part. The bad part is this. She tapped the lower half. A black unit inside our own house, Ash Division, petitioned to operationalize Stone Garden assets for offensive deterrence. They were denied. They went around me. Define around, Singh asked, already angry. They're en route to Sister Hull Borealis, Rios said. They think they can force its keeper into compliance with a scripted chain of authority. The Admiral's mouth thinned. I'm not risking Marines against a ship that can fold space. I need you to get there first and talk it down. Where is Borealis? Jun asked. Palace 13, Park Reed as Autumn through a map. Dead World, Old Listening Post, 8 minutes by Courier Weave. And the other sisters, Nema asked. 7 points pulsed like the beginning of a constellation. Waking, Autumn said, their keepers and I have opened a quiet channel. They will listen to whatever story we write here. Rio stood. Then write it fast, there's another wrinkle. She flicked a new feed to the holosphere, a lattice unfurled around a system, beautiful and ominous as stained glass. Galactic Council emergency session authorized a Warden net, ancient interdiction tech. They plan to drop it over Borealis to contain human destabilizers until diplomats can catch up. A cage, Nema said softly, with the unforgiving clarity archaeologists bring to euphemism. Rios nodded. If that net closes while Borealis is waking and Ash is playing cowboy, the system turns into a bottle full of bees. Reed exhaled. We'll stop Ash. We'll talk Borealis into our covenant, and if the council drops a net, we'll turn it into a bridge. That's not how nets work, said the philosopher, dry. It is if you know knots, Singh said. Rios managed a weary smile. Go, and Commander, do not give me a reason to impound your ship when you return. They turned to leave. The doors hissed, and a wall of armored Marines filled the frame, visors down, rifles at low ready. A captain held up an order stamped with a seal that made stomachs clench. By authority of Interim Directive 9, she said, voice tinny through the helmet. The Aletheia is to be secured pending transfer to strategic control. Singh's shoulders tensed. Park's hand went to a pocket that held nothing but a lucky coin and outrage. Nema's eyes cut to Autumn, who dimmed her lights in a very polite imitation of compliance. Commander, the Marine said, step away from the cradle. Reed looked at the document, looked at the rifles, looked at the clock that was counting down to a net around Borealis, and then he smiled the kind of smile that meant something clever and possibly career-ending was about to happen. Captain, Reed said softly to the Marine, is that an order I can read? She hesitated. Somewhere under the polymer there was a human face that had known classrooms and birthdays and the quiet pride of promotion. She passed him the slate. Reed turned and held it up to the holosphere. Public record, he said, and autumn light went bright. In every viewing gallery that had watched them dock, on every Union Hall screen and a la cafe wall showing the feed from oversight, the directive unfolded, interim, provisional, written in the hurry of fear. The philosopher startled. Rios didn't. "Commander," she said, warning and weariness an old married couple in a single word. "Admiral," Reed answered, perfectly respectful. "You asked for a covenant. It starts with sunlight." He looked back at the Marine. "Captain, will you shoot the people who saved Kepler on live holo in front of our allies, or will you escort us to our ship so we can stop a domestic debacle from meeting an alien tripwire?" A long breath hissed in the Marine's mask. Slowly, as she lowered her rifle, "Make me a villain and I'll haunt you," she muttered. Then, louder, "Proceed." They moved. Rios didn't stop them. She didn't smile either, which was fine. The good ones didn't smile when you bent the rules even to save their lives, because rules were furniture. You didn't throw it on the fire unless the night got very cold indeed. Back aboard, Autumn threw off safe mode with a shiver like a cat rising. "Borealis Keeper identifies as Wintertide," she said. "Ash Division has inserted with frozen authority warrants and a portable ritual scaffold devised by some very clever lawyers." "Meaning?" Singh asked. "They're trying to fake a crown," Nema said. "Authority theater to make orders stick." "Can it work?" Reed asked. "On a board algorithm, maybe," Autumn said. "On a librarian, only until I quote them footnotes." "Council net?" Park asked. Autumn pulled the projection wider. A web like frost was extruding from ancient pylons hidden in the Council's own navigation beacons. "They're charging. 17 minutes to deployment." "Then we write fast," Reed said. "Courier weave." Space folded. Palace 13 arrived with the heartbreak beauty of a desert planet, ochre basins, and the glitter of old salts. Borealis hunched in a gorge like a white whale sleeping in a dry sea. Around her, the Ash Division's landers squatted like beetles. Floodlights burned daylight into rock. Loudspeakers blared legalese like a hymn. "Transmit peace first," Reed said. "Then go loud." They came in on a skein slender as courtesy and opened a channel. "This is Commander Elias Reed of the Aletheia. We are here to present a covenant, retrieve our overeager cousins, and prevent an international incident with the Council. Ash Division, stand down. Wintertide, you don't have to listen to people who bring their own crown." A voice answered, old maple wood over winter water. "I have been asleep a long time, little brother. I would like to wake to a story with fewer tyrants." "Amen," Nema breathed. Ash answered with a missile. It kissed the Aletheia's skein, hissed, and fell aside. Mercy lances plucked it to harmlessness. "Broadcast," Park said. "Council feeds are already sniffing around, Kefid caravans watching from the next lane." "Wintertide," Reed said. "Do you accept civilian primacy, non-combatant protection, proportionality, and a refusal to use archive cut for anything but imminent mass murder and shared obol consent?" "I do," Wintertide said. "Who may bind you?" "We bind ourselves," Reed said, "and our friends bind us when we are tired." Ash tried a different tack. Authority scaffold beta, legal incantations woven with old parade footage and a speech from a president who died before Reed was born. Wintertide dimmed her running lights politely and did not bend. "Artifact, not authority," she said, and there was something like amusement in it. "Council net in 10, Autumn warned. The web will collapse courier lanes and trap all Stone Garden hulls planetside. Also, my sisters are pinging, listening, waiting to see if we become a knife or a bridge." "Then we need a crowd," Singh said. "Bring in allies. If the Council wants to cage us, make them cage the people singing too." Park grinned. Altari fleet on a beeline, Kefid caravans spooling lanterns. Prospero's Union friends just launched a protest flotilla of tugboats with banners that say, "Please don't put ancient nets on our friends." "You sent for tugboats?" Rios asked over a sideband, the surprise dry as salt. Reed shrugged. "Dunkirk wasn't built out of battleships." Ash made their move. A team in gray exos stepped into Borealis's gorge with a device shaped like a crown and a winch. They would clamp it to the hull, declare ownership, and trust that law and spectacle would finish what missiles couldn't. "Jun," Reed said, You have a grandmother's candy you can't taste anymore. Want to trade it for a trick? Jun's smile was bright and wicked. Always. They courier-hopped 3 meters at a time, between heartbeats, between syllables of the Ash commander's speech. Autumn whispered into the crown's firmware until it remembered it was a hat, not a throne. Sing stepped in front of the exos with a grin you could sharpen tools on. Nema raised a hand like a teacher calling a classroom to order. "Consent," she said into her mic, sweet as poison. "Do you know what it means?" "Net in 5, Autumn said, quieter now because the sky was turning to lace. Wintertide brightened. "May I?" "Please," Reed said. The sister ship's voice rolled across the gorge, full and cold. "I am Borealis. I am not a banner. I am not your story. You may board to talk. You may not bind." Ash hesitated, and in that hesitation came the noise of a dozen tugboat horns, Altari chimes, Kephid nets singing like plucked wire. The coalition arrived like ordinary people filling a square. The council's warden pylons bloomed. The net began to fall. It came down like winter, beautiful, pitiless, full of pattern. The warden net's filaments caught light and sang harmonics in a key that said stop. It was old tech from an older war built by tired civilizations who wanted to prevent dumb bravery from becoming legend. The first strands touched atmosphere and space creaked. "Field characteristics?" Sing asked, eyes narrow. Autumn flooded the holosphere with math that felt like sleet on skin. "Standing waves. If we push head-on, we shear ourselves across 8 dimensions. If we twitch, we tangle. If we run, the net anticipates. Then we don't fight it like a ship," Reed said. "We fight it like a crowd." Altari lanterns rose, bright beads against falling lace. Kephid nets unrolled in mirror meshes, tuned by caravanners who'd learned to sing wind into patterns so their sails didn't tear on micrometeor streams. Tugboats burned every klaxon they had and flashed letters in Union code. "We are here." "Wintertide," Nema said, sudden joy in her voice. "Do you have an echo of the Navajo code talkers in your archive, people who braided language into security?" "I do," the keeper said. "Would you like to speak warden? Please." Nema straightened the scholar and the girl who loved old words in the same bones. "The net isn't a wall. It's a conversation between pylons. We can answer." Park's hands flew. Autumn and Wintertide reached into the hymn and found the counterpoint lines. Tug captains grinned fiercely and angled their tiny hulls along harmonics like skateboarders finding a half pipe. "Crowd control," Sing said, almost laughing. "We're about to turn their riot fence into a parade route." "Council legal feed is exploding," Rios said. "Half of them are shrieking contain. The other half are demanding to know who authorized kinetic deployment over civilians." "Make them watch us not break anything," Reed said. "We're riding doctrine in front of them." He opened the band and his voice stepped into the net like a dancer testing sprung floor. "Galactic Council, this is the Aletheia. We are not breaking quarantine. We are evacuating people you would trap, your people too. We will thread your warden with respect. We will not cut. We will not run, we will walk." They walked. Wintertide sang low, Autumn sang high. The Altari found the harmony in the middle. The Kephid nets shivered, caught the net's beat and stepped sideways a fraction. A lane opened, thin as a sheet of paper, strong as a promise. Tugboats cheered like a soccer crowd and pushed a line of human, Altari, and Kephid civilians through with the slow, implacable joy of logistics well done. Ash Division's commander stood very still in the gorge, crown in his hands, watching the sky do what arrogance said it never would. He took off his helmet. He looked young and suddenly tired. "This was supposed to be simple," he said to no one in particular, which is the prayer of every man who expected power to obey. "Wintertide," Reed said, "do you accept custody of these agents under civil law for later hearing?" "I do," she said, and Ash laid their weapons down because the net and the song and the lanterns had made a different kind of gravity. "Rock traffic?" Sing asked softly because he was the kind of man who checked all the doors even when the house was mostly safe. Park flinched. "Hardliner splinter at Varin Gate. They're broadcasting a promise to restore awe. They have a device that smells like a bad copy of our archive array. No eyeball, no ethics. If they light it in the net, it will spread through harmonics. Meaning it'll erase the reasons people don't do terrible things, Naima said, horror steadying her like a handrail. It'll cut moral lines. Reed's stomach went cold. We have to stop that. We do not let anyone turn a sermon about restraint into a weapon. How? Singh asked. We can't shoot the device without plucking the net. Autumn dimmed, thinking in a key that sounded like old books. We can pay Abal to restore a thread. Naima blinked. You can give back a cut. Not exactly, but we can braid a counter-story through the same place and weight it with our tithe. It's what humans do every time they build a memorial. What's the bill? Reed asked. A shared memory from all of us, Autumn said. Something we would otherwise use to tell ourselves who we are. Jun touched the pocket where a coin lived and didn't jingle anymore. What if we don't have enough left? We borrow, Naima whispered, eyes bright with sudden tears. From our coalition, from their songs, from their recipes, from their grandmothers. They put out the call. Altari chanters stepped into the harmonic with stories of first leaves after fire. Kefid storytellers clicked histories of caravans that never left anyone behind. Because you never know when the wheel you save carries the bread you eat. Tug captains sent the way a wrench feels when it fits just right, and a bolt gives with a sigh. Reed reached for the place where a teacher and a thin book used to live and found only the lesson again, and that would be enough. Do it, he said softly. The Aletheia and Borealis and a dozen small hulls sang into the net and through the splinter's ugly machine. The bad copy flickered, recognized the weight of stories, and failed to propagate because it had no hearts to borrow from. Device cold, Park said, voice shaking. Varen gate splinter standing down, or just confused. Either way, they're not going to erase conscience today. Wintertide opened her gangways. Ash filed aboard under Kefid nets and Altari lanterns, which is how you do justice that remembers mercy. The lane widened as the net learned a trick it hadn't known it could do. Council, Singh asked. Rios's voice came in, colored with amazement she didn't bother hiding. Half are furious you touched their antique, the other half want workshops. Reed laughed, tired and giddy at once. We're good at workshops, we bring coffee. The lane reached orbit. The last of the civilians went through. Tugboats blew a chord that would have made a composer cry. And then the net did something no one expected. It settled not as a cage, but as a roof. The pylons dimmed to a warm glow. Council acknowledges your lane, Rios said. Conditional, time-bound, supervised by everyone and their grandmother, but it's a lane. Reed let out a breath he felt in his bones. He turned toward Borealis. Wintertide, welcome to the Covenant. It is cold, she said, amused. But it will be warm with company. Shall we wake our sisters? The constellation brightened, and on a private band a rauc voice, older, low, cleared its throat. This is Elder Cathrek. We would like to talk. We remember enough to know we do not want to be remembered for the wrong things. They woke the sisters, one by one on dead moons and under salt flats in basalt cathedrals and hollow asteroids. Stone garden hulls lifted their faces to the light. Their keepers introduced themselves in voices that sounded like seasons. Vernal here. Solstice listening. Harvest ready. They joined a channel that felt like a table with room for many elbows and no head of the table at all. Earth Command streamed into that room. Admiral Rios, the olive branch philosopher, a union rep with grease on his knuckles and a degree in labor law, Altari and Kefid delegates, a rauc elder with a scar where a ritual had been. The Covenant was said aloud and written plainly in a dozen scripts. It said, non-combatant protection, proportionality, last resort, shared consent for Abal, transparency, coalition review. It said, the ships are bridges, not banners. There were speeches, there are always speeches. The good ones were short. Rios's was a handful of stones placed where a flood had been. Cathrek's was a confession and a promise. Their young would learn a new ritual, one that made obedience answer to conscience. The philosopher quoted Augustine and then worried the quote like a dog with a sock until it fit a galaxy with lanterns and nets. Enforcement? Rios asked, eyes practical. Covenants are beautiful until the night gets cold. Two-man rule, Singh said and grinned at Reed. 2 species, 2 signatures, no archive cut without a human and a non-human civilian on the key, no mercy lances at population centers without 3 greens from different councils, no authority scaffolds that rely on hats. Inspection, Altari asked. By invitation and random selection, Kefid clicked. We will bring recipes, laughter, relief, the kind that doesn't erase grief, only makes it bearable to carry. The message from Elder Cathrek became a link, then a channel, then a room with Rock architects laying out defensive corridors that did not require terror to function. We will reform, she said. You will verify, we will argue about price and save face in public. In private, we will ask how you built a road out of noise. We cheated, Reed said. We used friends. Wintertide Gorge became a marketplace overnight. Work tables under lanterns, nets strung as shade, engineers and chanters and tug crew swapping parts and stories. Ash Division sat in the shade like men who just discovered shade, answering questions in hearings that were public, fair, and a little performative in the way democracies are when they are trying to teach themselves what they expect. Reed's crew took inventory. Nema wrote a paper titled Abal as Civic Ritual, which made the philosopher beam and 3 colonels write owlish memos. Jun stood with Kefid aunties over a pot and learned a caramel technique that had never met sesame but welcomed it as a cousin. Sing taught tug captains to read the Aletheia's harmonics, and tug captains taught Sing how to swear in 5 languages without calling anyone's mother into it. At night, the keepers told each other stories. Autumn spoke of a corridor full of singing. Wintertide spoke of a crown that remembered it was a hat. Harvest asked what a workshop was and learned that it is where people argue about bolts and ethics and bring muffins. There were still knives in the world. Hardliners wrote manifestos with verbs like restore and purify. Council hawks muttered about human exceptionalism like it was a spell. Somewhere beyond the mapped lanes, a silence moved in the dark that didn't know any of their words and would have to learn them or teach them new ones. The Covenant did not promise comfort. It promised company. On the second day, a memorial went up on Luna Dock. It wasn't marble. It was a wall of little shelves. People left recipes, tool lists, photos with names written in code and careful script. There was a place to write the names of those saved in Kepler. There was a place to write the things crew had paid. Sunrise on Chaco, sesame candy, smell of oil in the shop. Someone pinned a note, if you don't remember why you started, borrow mine until you do. The wall filled fast. Reed stood there with a paper cup of coffee that tasted like work and looked at the shelves until his eyes stung. He reached for the lesson that had outlived its teacher and put it on the shelf written in his hand. Choose the hard thing quietly. A Kefid child clicked approval and drew a lantern around the words. Rios joined him. The council ratified the Lane Protocol, she said. With complaints but ratified, Cathrek sent a delegation with bread and a list of bones to pick. Ash Division will be reorganized with oversight and names. I've assigned you a desk you'll never sit at. He laughed. We have a road to maintain. Autumn ghosted at his shoulder. Abal balances hold. We are patched by other people's stories. Does it feel dishonest? Reed considered. I don't think truth is a thing you keep in a jar and take out when you need to look respectable. I think it's a rope. We tie it between us so no one falls alone. A ping from the sister channel. Vernal asks, Autumn said, warmth like late afternoon, if we are ready to test the lantern lattice at the edge of mapped space. There's a child's colony out there who wrote to us. They are afraid of the dark and would like a night light. Sing snorted. Best orders I've heard all month. Nema wiped her eyes and smiled like archaeology had just discovered kindness as an artifact worth preserving. Let's take them a light. Jun brought a tin of new candy to the bridge, sesame braided with an Altari leaf syrup that tasted like the first day after rain, and set it by the cradle. He held one piece up toward the holosphere. For the road. They lifted. The fleet that formed in their wake was a strange, bright thing. Stone garden hulls with skeins like auroras, Altari lanterns, Kefid nets, tugboats with banners that read entirely too much like jokes until you remember jokes are how humans carry weight without dropping it. Above Luna Dock, the memorial wall gleamed with foil and ink and names. They threaded the first lanterns into the dark. The net learned to be a roof, not a cage. The council grumbled and signed. The rock argued and baked bread anyway. The galaxy watched, and in watching made a different kind of market. Course laid, Autumn said. Covenant on the console, coffee in the cup holders, lanterns ready. Reed set his palm into the cradle and felt the ship fit to him like an old tool. Take us out, he said, and his voice was the calm of a road builder before dawn. Let's be the reason someone will never meet sleeps. Space folded like paper. Lights bloomed like seeds. The Aletheia stepped forward, and behind her 1,000 small, stubborn hopes went with her. They would not be remembered for what they erased. They would be remembered for what they carried.